the idea of thesis. Knowing that that's what we're aiming for from the beginning is really important and kind of shapes our education at SCI-Arc.
There is a wonderful sense of positive and optimism coming out of the work. It's an opportunity for these young architects to give back and push back in a good way. Each of them can start to plan the basis for what kind of architects they want to become.
My thesis is titled Inside Out. The thesis is interested in rethinking and rupturing current models of government and power, and doing so by bringing ideas of domesticity and the living room into the political realm.
The title of the thesis is called Queer Comforts, Romania Transplant Center. And the thesis project itself is trying to explore ways of using queer tactic to reappropriate elements that is typically found in everyday environments. So it's like translating that from domestic scale into architectural scale and try to deal with, within the lens of queerness, how to solve and challenge rigid medical program type like a hospital.
Our project tries to bring a little bit of humanity into that program type, whether it's by its interiors and the form itself, but also this idea of reappropriating everyday elements that typically are thought of as comforting into a bigger architecture scale.
One of the things that really struck me today was the way that the students were able to balance their interests in new social agendas and social interests with aesthetics. This is really our territory. This is SCI-Arc's territory. It's not one or the other. We have to be in a place where we're using our expertise as architects. We have to empower ourselves by using the tools that we already have. The students were amazing the way that they did that. They did it almost naturally, which was just really beautiful to see.
There were a lot more topics about addressing social issues but addressing social issues with very specific architectural take. And I think that was really exciting, and thinking about how architecture can be inventive and thinking about not only problem solving, but also how these issues can push the disciplinary problems.
The title of my thesis is The Deep Object. My project drew a lot of inspiration from language, enigmas, space as a manifold complex entity, trying to invent a new typology of architectural object.
Our thesis expanding loop centers the notion of edge, which redefines the idea of contemporary mixed-use urban complex.
We are centered on the notion of the edge and redefining and subverting its logic of separation through diverse superimpositions such as layering, delamination, mass, and looping.
Thesis definitely give us the opportunity to explore the large-scale building and work on in the multiple different systems together, then create a kind of like the autonomous and the new community at the edge of the New York.
The best part of what thesis offers a student, it is self-directed work in the best possible way. When they emerge out of that, they have the ability at least to engage the world with a project that's provocative, that it can be applied to other modalities, other situations, certainly programs, building types.
I liked to hear the students articulate the way that their work would impact the present and even the future of our world. And in those proposals that were always very specific and always very thoughtful, there was a sense of this is what architecture can do. This is how architecture can contribute.
The thesis examines the methodology of reseeing and renaming. Graphic transcription means we use this graphic vocabulary to translate it into actually architecture.
In this thesis, we already try to use this system to design not only the high-rise on the site, but also the surrounding buildings to show the development of the city, which is influenced by our building on the site.
this class has had a unique experience and brings a dynamic outlook and a whole new set of skills that makes them better prepared, I think, to enter the profession as communicators and design leaders. This generation, I think, is really prepared to take on the challenges and to rethink forms of work, play, learning, and care.
This year's thesis was an incredible range of ideas. Students have a level of sophistication where they are able to take on uncomfortable and challenging topics, but doing it through the lens of aesthetics and architectural spatial constructs.
I think there's been interesting projects, a lot of ideas relating to the ideas of the ground. It also kind of relates to context, projects that are looking at the ground not to escape or to avoid context, but to almost generate an entirely new context, almost like a kind of a world-making idea, understanding the ground as a kind of socio-political, cultural ground.
The name of my project is Sidebar. My project is about agonistic democracy and what that looks like in architecture and what that looks like expressed in architecture through multiple different forms. Have broken up the singular parliament into 5 or 6 different individual pieces. These kind of resin models show through the reflection the different interpretations and ways that this individual piece that's inside can be interpreted.
Our thesis is called Hollow Figures. It's essentially about using the void as a way to connect different autonomous volumes. We selected the European Parliament in Brussels, using a void to connect the city, the parliament, the park, all in one area, integrating the public into the building.
Since our project has been trying to explore how void can be activated to connect different autonomous volumes, we decided to emphasize it by having this very highly perforated copper facade.
The title of my thesis was Mirage. It was a research and development complex for the Hyperloop. It was mainly focused on distortion and resolution and using different optical techniques like moire, parallax, and anamorphism to actually put that into the exterior as a mirage.
The title of our thesis is The Double Life of Forms. We were interested in the idea of having a large volumetric and monolithic mass that we would carve out of in order to create voids. One of the qualities that gave us, carving out and casting on past and future, whether this object was added to the site or subtracted from the site.
We were trying to bring in elements of the site back to our massing. We came up with 3 kinds of geometries, which was geological, organic, and geometrical. Mainly our project was oscillating between man-made and nature and casting in, casting out.
Thesis at SCI-Arc for me is really a joyous adventure. There is just a sense of the kind of fearless, positive, and fully supported inquiry that I think the students are taking on. What shows is that level of, in a sense, confidence that it's okay for it not to be perfect or just right, but to be fearlessly moving forward.